Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sarah Richson, and I am excited to be here with you today. And we are looking at the topic of simple ways to be inclusive in the workplace. How can we be more inclusive? How can we create? And inclusivity is about having a respectful and dignified workplace, a workplace where everybody feels safe and comfortable to work and ensure that they are who they are without being judged. So today, I would like, first of all, to talk about difference, because it is difference that causes people to sometimes feel discriminated against. If I'm different from you, then definitely that could make me, in some ways, feel because of that difference, I'm treated in a different way and whatever, I'm not included in everything, especially at the workspace. So I just want to mention the kinds of differences that occur in the workplace, but these differences actually cause a lot of tension and cause situations where certain groups feel vulnerable, feel left out, or feel like they are not actually part of, the organization. And as assistants, we play a very big role in interacting with people in our day-to-day basis. We are doing actions or we are interacting with people in a different way, in one way or the other. So just hold on. As we start looking at the things that make us different, I want to start by talking about values. So our values can actually cause difference between us. And when I look at the values, I actually think of one person could really have a different value to the way they work. Some people prefer working from home. Some people prefer working from the office. Some people value work before life. Some people value life before work. Some people believe I work to earn a living. Some people believe I live in order to work. So, I mean, the different value systems come from our belief systems. And some of them are driven by religion, some of them are driven by our background, some of them are driven by, things that have shaped us. But it's important that our value system and our belief system can make us different. That does not mean that one person is better than the other person, right? Now, let us look at things to do with gender. And gender is simply the role that a male or a female plays or is expected to play in society. And therefore, you find in certain societies, um, the male is seen as a breadwinner, the woman is seen as somebody who is a helper, and therefore their work takes secondary precedence, their professional life, compared to the man. And in other societies, it is egalitarian and democratic in approach, and therefore both the work of the male and female are seen at par. While in others, you find that men are okay in taking the caregiver and the helper role, while the female is allowed to take on breadwinner roles. And so these again make us difference, and you will interact with people who have these differences in the way they perceive life and the way they live life. And it could be very, very wrong and derogatory for you to look down on people's perspectives of gender. It's also wrong to not understand how age plays in, and this could be linked. So many of the things that we see as differences are actually interlinked in one way or the other. So, how we treat people of certain ages and the respect we give people with different ages can also vary from society to society. And this then shows up in the workplace. And this is where you can find that people are not so inclusive when it comes to cross generational aspects. So, you could find some people find it difficult to work with or for a supervisor who is younger than them. And for what reason? This is because if you look at their society and their belief system, they would really perceive that age brings wisdom, and also knowledge is equal to age. But we do know uh, factually, from a very factual perspective, that this is not true. That you will find people of different generations who hold different levels of what I call expert power. Expert power comes from your level of expertise and not your age group. But traditionally, we've always been looking at age group and feeling that age group actually provides the wisdom, knowledge, and skills that you would have. And so we find that groups of people today bring certain similarities because of their age, because of the generational similarities. So you find baby boomers and Gen Xers are known to be working very hard, believing that you have to go to the office, working from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, and being seen in order to be able to be believed that you're working. While the millennials, the Gen Z, and the alphas who are coming up are more digital citizens, believing that remote work is actually work, that putting in less work and more output is actually the key thing. So they manage by outcomes and not by attendance. The way they approach work, they will tell you, I will deliver. It doesn't matter where I'm sitting or what time I deliver. Some of them prefer to work at night. Some of them prefer to work during the day or early in the morning or at midnight or whatever. I mean, it doesn't sit well and it is not easily understood by the other generations, but it is what I'm talking about again. Being inclusive, you have to be open minded to understand the generational differences and generational similarities. The other thing is definitely culture. And race and culture plays a big role in our differences. Many times you walk into metropolitan cities around the world and in many continents, you will see different. All you have to do, I always say, is just jump to the nearest cafe or go to the local eatery, and you will be able to see the diversity within the local area, the local town, or even in the local organizations. And so sometimes not understanding that this also brings different cultures, this also brings different people and different beliefs, again, it can have an impact on the way we are viewing diversity. So, where there's multicultural teams, you will find sometimes there's issues arising around not understanding why we look different. You know, our different races, we have different identities. Some of us come from the same race, but we have different identities. And identities could be gender identities, could be race identities, could be different identities. So it's also very, very important, if you are creating a respectful and inclusive culture, to be cognizant of the fact that there's differences around this. And then there's also, and racism is whereby one race thinks they're more or treats another race in a derogatory manner, while intercultural colorism, these are issues that are also facing. I know I have young people in my home who are talking about it. It's been a Twitter conversation, it's been an organizational conversation, a leadership conversation. In my country and in many other spaces as well, intercultural colorism is where people of the same race think that people of a certain pigmentation or skin color are inferior, um, come from an inferior perspective than others, and therefore they treat them in a certain way. Giving jobs consciously or unconsciously, unconscious bias is where you're not even conscious on why you tend to think that some people are superior, some people are better than others. And therefore, you find that in intercultural colorism, for example, a very key example is you see in Africa, people have different color pigmentation, skin color pigmentation. And so you'll find people who have melanin, and so they're darker skinned, people who have less melanin, who are lighter skinned, and people who are from interracial marriages. And so with that, they start giving jobs or making receptionists. I think it started off with reception work or people facing roles or whatever, using the lighter skinned girls, even in advertisements, and looking at certain airlines, you'd see a whole picture and people of light skin race being placed in the advertisement, while when you visit the actual country and you come through the airport, you're actually shocked at the representation, the real representation on the ground. And you find out that and so when you start asking this question, and this is from some of the work that I did in different countries in Africa, I started asking, is this a representation of your culture, of your race, of your whatever? And it came out very clearly that people felt that people with less melanin were better seen, had better status, were better in terms of being able to do people facing jobs and everything. And so they got jobs while the dark-skinned girls did not. And so this shows lack of inclusivity and unconscious bias in the way we do things. So thinking one is actually better than the other. Today, I'm glad to say that many organizations and multinationals and countries have become more cognizant of that. And therefore, they're ensuring that such pictures, such images, when you become more aware, then someone somewhere will say, this is not an inclusive image. Could we actually make sure the image is representative of the reality of our country or our organization? The other thing is around practices. So let's think about eating. And I fell foul on this once because I used to work as a global HR director. And in my role, going round to all my countries and visiting the different teams that I had in different countries, I once found myself in Asia. And when it was lunchtime, I was obviously looking because I'd been to 12 different countries, I'd been to Mauritius, to where, and at lunchtime, I always looked forward to being taken to some of the best restaurants to eat some of the best food and everything. So at lunchtime, I turned around to my then HR director for the country director, and I told her, "Hey, so where are you taking me for lunch today?" And I was just dying to dip my fork and knife into something nice and Asian. And what I love is actually one of my favorite foods. And I was told that actually I needed to wait until all the staff came and we are going to sit down and eat. Now, I thought we are going to sit down on chairs and eat. And then I found out we are actually going to literally sit down on the floor on a mat. And food would be brought in big plates, and we were all going to share. And we were going to use our hands to eat. Now, I'm African, so I'm quite used to seeing people eat from the same plate. And I'm also quite used to using my hands to eat certain meals. We have a local meal here called ugali, and I always use my hand. You can't use a fork and knife around that ugali and the sauce and everything. But I was in shock. And I think, first of all, they hadn't thought, obviously, at all of whether I'd be shocked or not in terms of being asked to sit on the floor and, share a meal with. Then they were strangers, although they were my teammates and whatever. But then I also had not processed how my reaction, and I don't think my facial expression was a kind one at that point. It was that of shock, blatant shock and everything. And my HR country director had to call me to the side and ask me, "Sarah, is it a problem?" She thought she's getting in trouble. She was panicking. She was saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It is so natural for us to share lunch. I never thought about you." And I had to quickly realize I am also, again, from my cross-cultural training, usually the host country is the host and I'm a guest. And unless I had given made specific requests or whatever, I hadn't said I have a problem with this. And so they'd gone ahead and organized. And so it is not okay to look down on the way people eat. It's not okay to look down on the way people greet, the way people dress, the way people show up. And sometimes they come and live in our countries or they work in our organizations. They look different. At lunchtime, they eat different. They greet different. Some of them give you 3 kisses on the cheek. Some of them give you a hand. Some of them don't give you a hand. When I was doing some work in Somalia, I remember, I couldn't shake, and many Muslim countries, I couldn't shake the hands of men. And I didn't feel bad because I realized it's not that they are excluding me. It's a difference in culture and religion. And once you understand that, and these are the things I just want to lay out first for us to have a deeper understanding on the differences that are actually embedded either on culture, values, gender, religion, race, different things that people can't actually do anything about. And so it's important for us to understand those things. I think understanding, even though you're not accepting someone's religion, but understanding it helps you to realize that, you know what, we can still include them, but include them in a certain way. Whenever I talk about religion, I remember, again, as a manager, one day realizing that setting up my meetings on a Friday afternoon was not a good idea. And why was that? It's because my Muslim team members needed to go to pray. And so setting it up on a Friday afternoon was very difficult. And I remember, again, as I've told you, I was in Somalia, people setting up meetings on a Sunday. And Sunday for me is a prayer day. And so you can imagine as well for them to start to understand that, you know what, with Sarah, Sundays just don't work. And for them to include me, we started working with Mondays. And Mondays to Thursdays worked well, so that nobody is excluded. We're talking about simple ways of creating an inclusive workplace. Okay, so it's those little things. By the way, it's the small things that go a big or a long way. The other thing is language, and I really want to talk about language because in the workplace we do have formal official language. We do. And we need to understand what language is acceptable in a certain place. But we also need to be very keen on the issue of language, because sometimes it can make you feel included or excluded. And I will start with the same language issues that I have seen in my career, working in the people space. Sometimes people assume because we are speaking English, we are both speaking English, or we are all speaking English. I'll give you a clear example. I have young adult kids, and they'll be seated around the table, especially when they were teenagers, and they will speak English, and I don't get what they're talking about. They are speaking English, but they are using slang. Slang, again, is connected to the baby boomer. So when you look at age, you start understanding that people create their own words. They come with their own colloquialisms that only they understand. And therefore, there are certain same language issues that can create exclusion. You are not being inclusive. You are not, you're leaving somebody out. The other thing about the same language issue is accents. And I faced this personally, especially because I worked in Europe and worked in many international countries for quite some time before going back to my own country. And therefore, in many people's ears, and I'm sure even as I'm doing this video, I'm very, very aware that I'm speaking English, but I do have an accent because English is not my first language. And if somebody of an English orientation spoke my language, they would have an accent. And it's just natural. And therefore, there can be exclusion. People can feel excluded even though they are speaking the same language. So simply because people are both, we are both French speakers, or we are both German speakers, or we are both Swahili speakers, does not mean that we understand each other or we always feel included. So be very cognizant of the fact of the way you use language, because you can use language to exclude and you can use language to include. Again, language is followed through with your facial expressions, with your body expressions, with your body language, with your eye contact for somebody to feel included. So these are very, very simple things. Do not make assumptions that because people are speaking the same language, they're actually on the same page. Then there's the different language issues, which are more obvious. These ones, because the minute you start speaking French, I'm in a francophone country, and you all just, start speaking French and everything, and I'm Anglophone, I feel excluded. I immediately, the language, the fact that I cannot understand makes me feel like I don't know, I'm not participating. I can't fully participate because I do not understand and I cannot speak the language. So be very cognizant that if you have somebody of a different language in the room, and sometimes again, you could be from the same country, but you've grown up in different backgrounds or different countries, and therefore you find somebody of Chinese origin or African origin who does not understand local languages, Mandarin, Swahili or things like that. And therefore you naturally assuming and going into those languages could actually exclude them. And in the workplace, this can hamper work. It can hamper teamwork. It can hamper, people being able to be productive. The other thing around language is status. So in many places, again, you can find people speaking the same language, but because of their education level, because of their status, because of their exposure, they do have a certain accent that gives them a certain status. Sometimes you could actually start stereotyping a person based on how they are speaking English. You'd say, oh, I know this one is from there, or I know that one is from there. I know this one is literate. I know this one is semi-literate. I know this one is highly educated or whatever, based on the kinds of language that they are using. I've seen it in meetings, people starting to use strategic level words, and people, making others feel they can't really open their mouths and express themselves because they do not articulate themselves in the way or at the level that another person is doing, especially if you're in a technical meeting. And I know for assistants, you could be sitting in a highly technical meeting, or you could be dealing with people who use a lot of acronyms and whatever, and it could exclude you. Or if you are the one doing that, you could exclude others, writing emails with all those acronyms, using certain language and words that, again, people who are reading it would struggle to understand. And language can depict authority and power, just as status can. And so we can actually make people feel excluded just because of the authority or the power levels or the cadre of staff that we are in the organization. I remember once asking an organization why every Christmas the CEO's PA and all the PAs for the top leadership always used to ensure that they have ordered diaries for the leaders and for the leaders' families and their friends, and to give out to key company accounts. But nobody ordered diaries for the driver. Nobody ordered a diary for the security guard. Nobody ordered the diary for a receptionist or the person who's serving us tea. And I used to ask, to whom do you think this diary would matter the most? Once, just because I used to get so many, I would get from my own organization, then I'd get from every country, and then I'd get from all the other organizations that interacted with our organization. And so my desk would just be piling up during Christmas with so many diaries and calendars and so many things that I really don't need, because I am very specific on how I want my calendar, my planner, and my diary to look like. And so I would prefer to walk into Paper Chase and buy it myself, purchase it myself, and choose the colors and everything. But every time the girl who used to clean my desk and make my tea used to walk in, she used to say, hey, madam, these are really nice, but there are so many of them. These are really nice. But in one way or the other, she was showing interest in those diaries and whatever, because I was thinking it's either I'll give them, and if I don't have enough, even my kids had enough of these things. So when I told her, pick one, and she was like, which one? I said, you pick any that you want. I'm telling this girl who serves me tea. And you cannot imagine how excited she was. This is someone who probably can't afford something of high quality like that, somebody who needs it or would love to have it, for whatever reason, who would feel it's prestigious for her to have it, but we have not thought about her. And so I started realizing, wow, why don't I give these things to people? It has more impact. And so when I saw her coming for the next whole month, when January kicks in, every day at lunchtime, I see her writing something in that book that I gave her. I'm like, this thing turned out to be a really powerful thing for her, a wonderful gift, actually. And she told me, so I asked her if she's enjoying it, and she said everybody in the kitchen envies her and wishes they could also have something as nice as that. And I told her, I have so many that I put, at the back of my desk. Please carry them and give everybody else in the kitchen. And again, I was shocked at how excited they were to be included in just the distribution of something as simple as a diary, something we all do all the time. And it is us assistants. Sometimes we are placing these orders, and there are certain groups who will never ever see, and they need it even more. When people go to conferences and they're given those pens or markers or little gifts or whatever, and they get so many of them from so many conferences because they go all over the world all the time. Can you imagine which people would also be so excited to get such things? So for me, it showed me very clearly that every time I am doing these orders and everything, this is the best gift. It's almost like a bonus, and it costs a penny and a dime to make them smile so much, and they would really, really value something like that. So please, regardless of the things that, include or exclude people of power or lack of power, we have to understand the issue of interest as well. Who has interest even though they don't have power? And to be inclusive, you have to think of people's interests, not just people's power. And then finally, I want to talk about personality traits because these are very, very key as well. It's very important for us to know that we are different based on our traits. One person could be a red, or choleric type person, and so they are full on, they tell it as it is, they're blunt with the way they communicate and everything, and you could feel some type of way. They'll tell you, yes, you can come or you can't come, they're straight up. And so depending on how they rub you, you might want to include them in conversations or not. You might want to include them in a party invitation or not. You might want to think, in terms of those kinds of things. Or you could find the quieter, melancholic personality traits. People who like to keep to themselves, people who are okay, they're not actually feeling excluded if you don't call them to that meeting or every single meeting. They're not feeling excluded if you're not involving them in every single thing, but they will be feeling excluded if it's something that the entire team is doing and they are actually the expert in that specific piece, but you keep overriding their decisions or not allowing them to maybe have an input in a meeting or things like that. So when we are thinking about inclusivity, we need to always remember it is those differences that will cause us to feel included or not. At this point, I want to make something very, very clear. Even as we are looking to build inclusive workplaces, let us understand that diversity is not inclusion. People going all out and being able to ensure that your voice is heard, is included. Just because you are there does not mean that you're actually included. And so let us unpack some of these terms. First of all, I want to unpack diversity, then unpack inclusion. Diversity is simply recognizing difference and acknowledging that there's benefit in having various perspectives of various people around the table, or having our website showing, an Asian and a white Caucasian and an African and, name it. Yeah. So diversity recognizes that and ensures, in fact, marketing teams are really good at ensuring that we show diversity. However, inclusion is where you actively create an inclusive environment through deliberate programs that enable the diverse range of people to work together effectively. So the person who is inclusive sees difference as a benefit, while the person who pushes diversity understands and acknowledges that they do need to have different perspectives. They're not acknowledging the benefits, they're just acknowledging that it is important to actually have different opinions. And therefore, I want to bring in a third wheel, which is called diversity, inclusion, and belonging, DIB. So for us practitioners in the space of looking at inclusive environments, we actually look for really environments that not only show diversity, but are inclusive and create a sense of belonging. So what is diversity? Diversity is a fact. Inclusion is a behavior. Belonging is the emotional outcome that people want from that behavior. I repeat, diversity is a fact. So you can't tell me, oh, we are not diverse and everything, when you can check our website and see we have equal men and women on our board. We have all types of races in our board. We have all different types of age groups in our board or whatever. You know, we can argue those facts and they are there. We can give you the names, we can show you, and we can prove the facts. However, inclusion is a behavior. And so this is how it looks like. For the fact, for diversity, being invited or being on the list of invitations to a party is diversity. The fact that there's both men, women, young, old, able-bodied, disabled, different personality traits, different team members, different. They're all on the list. I can prove the fact. I have made sure my list is diverse, right? Excellent. So diverse people are invited to the party. But being at the party and then being invited to dance while at the party, being invited to contribute while at the meeting, being invited to participate when you're in that space with these different people. If you're the youngest in the group, being invited to participate or to share your voice or opinion, that is inclusion. That is the behavior we are talking about. Now, belonging is when somebody feels welcome and free to dance for hours away without worrying about whether they're offending anyone at that party. That is a sense of belonging. It's an emotional outcome. I've been included, but I've been made to feel so safe. I've been respected. My opinion, my liberties, my freedoms have been allowed such that I don't feel like I have to ask permission to be who I am and to do what I want to do. And therefore, that is actually the outcome of a diverse and inclusive space. And that is why it is so important to understand the difference of the three aspects: diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Therefore, in summary, there are certain common themes in diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So when you are looking at them from a perspective of the organization, you usually see there's good policies in place and also practices. For us to be more inclusive, we usually have gender equality, we usually have flexi time, fair pay, the way we recruit and retain staff, promotion policies. We have non-biased wordings on the adverts. You know, we have sexual harassment policies, and we also have, you know, other really good items like study leave. Those things would be present in such a space. You'd also find that the environment would be inclusive. You'd have prayer rooms. Obviously, you know, there's staff who pray during the day. or have certain religious beliefs. You'd find areas for meditation, private rooms for breastfeeding moms. You'd had good ergonomics that consider all types of able or differently abled people. You'd see little things such as, just something like having brailles, yeah, on your computers, on your laptops, or even business cards. It is safe. There's ramps. We are thinking about people who are differently abled in different ways. So the environment is quite conducive. In terms of life work balance, you find there's wellness programs, there's good awareness around health and wellness and safety. Now that we are in the COVID times, you also realize that there's social distancing, there's all the protocols put in place to ensure a safe working environment. We are also having things like gym facilities or ability for staff to be able to go to such facilities to look after their health and wellness. There is good elements and a good balance between pleasure and pressure in that type of environment. The hours for work and the hours for home, the respect for time, personal time and personal space, email time and phone time and everything is very, very important. I was doing another training elsewhere, and the co-facilitator told me that at the organization where she works, they have something at the signature level of every email, and it says, "I am sending this email at my own time and my own comfort. Please feel free not to answer right away, and to please answer when you have your own time and your own comfort." This just shows that even though I'm sending it, I might feel uh, my own time or comfort is midnight. I'm not expecting you to respond immediately. You can actually take your time and respond at a more appropriate time for you. And that in itself has just relieved the pressure, that people feel hung on in terms of emails and everything, because you send out an email to the whole team. Tony is a single dad. Annette is not a parent, and not probably even married. Um, John is, I mean, looking after his parents or whatever, and Bob is just watching movies or something like that. And so Bob responds immediately. And that puts pressure on the other three, feeling like, oh, wow, we are not going to be included in ABCD, or because we can't respond, because we can't do this, because we can't do that. And they start feeling some type of way. So for us to be inclusive, we should also give those kinds of subtle communication permissions for people to be able to respond to things at their own time, in their own way, and show a level of understanding that people are different. The other thing is parent-friendly spaces. I remember when I was working, and I always used to look for these words in the policy, in the website, in the onboarding plan, or whatever I wanted. In fact, I used to apply for jobs when they had those words in the advert, that this is a parent-friendly space. And so that is something that really, really attracted me. They had childcare benefits, they had paid parental leave, emergency leaves if I needed to go and be with my children, a family day out. When I was a HR director myself, I used to ensure we have days like bring your child to work so they can come and see where their parents are and everything, but also including people who are not yet parents at that point, to be able to see how it is to work and have kids, and just raise awareness on what some of the team members could be going through. So those kinds of things really, really helped. And from a leadership perspective, the kind of themes we are seeing in an inclusive environment is a lot of upskilling, a lot of respectful communication from the leaders, a lot of development of the leaders to understand diversity and inclusion, a lot of coaching, a lot of mentorship as a style of management rather than the lead by fear type of approach. And so these things are really, really summaries that help. It's also important for us to start looking at universities today. And as we look at the university environment, it starts showing us what type of people are going to be coming out into the workspace. And so we are going to be having a lot of hybrid colleagues. We are going to be having people who look a certain way but speak a different way. I always give an example of whereby, okay, so my daughters are British and they grew up in the UK and they have a British accent. And every time they show up in a Kenyan restaurant, uh, most of the time they are being spoken to in the local language in Swahili, which they don't understand. And my daughter's best friend, who's grown up in Kenya, was born and bred and everything, but her parents are European. And one parent is European and one parent is Kenyan, is always spoken to in English in those restaurants, and they are best friends. So the one who looks like an African, a pure African, can't understand the local language. And the one who looks European actually speaks the local language fluently and is the one who's coming to aid the other one. And so, because they look different, because we are used to seeing obviously a black face on an African, and assuming they speak the local language, they'll be the local person or whatever, we could be making those mistakes. So again, these are hybrid, and my daughter goes to a university which she tells me 75% of the students are hybrid, cross-cultural marriages, children born out of having been to multiple countries and hold dual nationalities and things like that. So this is a prevalent situation, and we as assistants need to be very cognizant of that. We could easily exclude someone by not being conscious that we are excluding them, either, as I said, through language or through assumptions and things like that. So be very, very aware that you could also have hybrid colleagues. So there are some work ethic differences that sometimes can make you exclude or include. So to be inclusive, you need to understand these differences. For the Gen X, let's look at Gen X and millennials. And then your homework is to go and look at Gen Z and Alpha and look at their work ethics. So I'll just mention a few here. For the Gen X, it was always work comes first. For the millennial, it was life comes first. For the Gen X, most people believe the boss deserves respect, while the millennials believe equality and respect must be earned. For Gen X, you find they like to work 9 to 5, and the millennials don't want a defined work clock. Tell me what needs to get done and measure me on what gets done, not the time or the clock. For the Gen X, they prefer, if they see you in the office, the face-to-face is what matters. It's what shows me that you're working. But when it comes to the millennials, they believe in the digital contact. That when you have sent me an email or I've sent you a WhatsApp, that's done. We are working. So when you start understanding all these kinds of differences, it helps you to work much better and to be more inclusive of the work cultures and ethics that the different groups actually have or bring to the table. It's also important to be inclusive to expand our knowledge. For example, Europe is not a country. Africa is not a country. Those are continents. So in trying to be polite and whatever, you could be speaking to me who is a Kenyan and saying, hi, yeah, I used to have a friend from Nigeria. Nigeria and Kenya are very far in terms of culture, differences, similarities or whatever, very, very language, name it, all the elements of difference that I told you. So trying to compare or mentioning that in relation to my being a Kenyan does not make sense. Just like, thinking a Chinese Indian and a Chinese are the same. So those little intricacies, for me, when I worked with different groups and diverse groups, I started realizing that I really need to start understanding so that I'm respectful of people's cultures, where they're coming from, their backgrounds, and I'm expanding my knowledge one moment at a time. And also always saying if I don't have enough knowledge, but being curious enough to want to understand. We also need to understand neurodiversity. We can't just focus on the neurotypical people. There are so many people living out there who are neurodivergent in their thinking, in their ways. People have learning disabilities and things like that. So it's very easy to exclude. And I saw it at recruitment. Sometimes somebody has come for a meeting, they want to see a director, and if you are the assistant, because they look or they're acting a certain way, or they can't sit probably in the dark for long, or they can't sit alone without fidgeting or whatever, you start, looking at them like, excuse me, why are you twitching, or why are you looking funny, or why are you speaking funny? It's not nice. If I can say this and say it and say it and say it, I mean, I'm also very passionate about love in the workplace. And if I can say how excluding, how rude, blatantly rude sometimes we can be by the lack of knowledge and our ignorance of other people's dignity and difference or being. And I hope this session will start opening up our hearts and our minds to see these kinds of things, the stigmas that we put on people, or the kinds of things and expectations we have on various people, and they are who they are based on their diverse approach. So it's important that we understand neurodiversity as well as anything. And therefore, I would like for us to consider the finality of tips that we need in order to be in a very inclusive space. So for me, I've always worked at selecting different organizations that are actually portraying and showing inclusivity, and these are the elements that we look at in that process. One of them, for us to select you as a highly inclusive culture and space, the first thing is to speak an organization that shows evidence of speaking up about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. It's not a hidden or taboo subject, it's talked about. And to speak about it means you become an upstander and not a bystander. When you're seeing somebody excluding others, discriminating against others, stereotyping others, you upstand, you stand up to it or against it. You don't bystand and just watch or be silent or ignore because it's not touching you. The other thing about such a space is they recognize unconscious biases and stereotypes very quickly, and they stand up against them. So, and they actually have a lot of developmental programs to help people understand that they have unconscious biases and stereotypes. And so you can do that as well and speak up about it. Then there's the actions that a team can take. At team level, think through those meetings. Think about their timings. I told you the example of when I used to set up the timings on Friday afternoons. I thought that's excellent. It's a quiet time. I finished my work week, and I can do a team meeting, but I found out I'm excluding others. I'm not being inclusive. So think through the timings of your meetings. Think through your invitations. How do they look like? Do they make people feel inclusive when they see the language, when they read it, when they look at the visuals? Think about agendas. Whether you're doing an office party or whatever, how does the agenda look like? Are you including people's voices or different groups or whatever? Think about the actual discussion and what happens during that discussion. Have you invited people to the party, but you're not allowing them to participate in the discussion or participate in the party? They're not being invited to dance. Don't assume. For example, don't assume that because somebody is a dad, they don't need family time. They have a wife. Neither should you assume that a single person has more work time to give. They should be working harder. They don't have children. Neither should you assume that people of the same race are the same. They speak the same, they eat the same, they'll have the same attitudes or whatever. No. Neither should you assume that people of a certain personality trait are better than others of a different personality trait. Not at all. So assumption kills inclusion. We assume too much, we stereotype, we discriminate. Show empathy. As a team, have empathy on all forms of people, and especially the examples that I've given here. Then, as an executive, The executive office can actually undertake certain actions. And what are these actions? These actions include, we require the assistant and the executive to understand different perspectives. And I found out that even sometimes when we are taking notes, we don't take notes. When you take notes and you're not taking notes of different perspectives, it could be quite exclusive. So we need to be inclusive and to understand we might have variations of the truth, not variations of the fact, but variations of the truth in terms of opinion and perspectives. It depends from where I'm looking at the sea. We could be arguing until kingdom come. You say the sea is flat. I'm saying the sea is dark. You're saying it's blue. It looks like a saucer. I'm saying, no, it has a beach. You're saying, no, it doesn't have a beach. All those things are true about the sea or the ocean. It depends on which perspective or direction you looked at it from. So be very aware of that for you to be inclusive. For you to be inclusive at the executive office level, you need to embrace your identity as a leader or as a representative of that leader. And in diverse situations, you need to lead through action. So how do you do that? When it's time to go for leave, go for leave. When it's time to be with your children and a phone call comes in, go. When it's time to speak up about your experience, share. Be curious. Question sameness. Why do we have the same people coming for this meeting all the time? Why do we do things the same way? Why do we eat the same food? We don't think of the vegans or the different diets or whatever. Why? Be curious and question consistent sameness. Drive affirmative action, and it will ensure equality. So what does that mean? Maybe it means that for us to all see through across the fence, based on our heights, you can't give us all the same stool because you're driving equity. But for equality, probably Sarah needs a higher stool because she's shorter, and Matthew can actually stand and see over the fence, and maybe Tina needs to stand on a smaller stool than Sarah's. You're giving us different things, but at least it's helping us all to be included in watching the game across the fence. Affirmative action is not discrimination or favoritism. It is exactly that. It is affirmative action to promote equality. Create a safe environment. Let people feel when they come to the executive's office, they are treated in an inclusive manner, a respectable manner, a dignified manner, regardless of the issue, regardless of the cadre, regardless of who they are. As an assistant, just stop and say hi to somebody who would never even expect you to say hi, and consistently do so. And then company actions are things like lunch and learns, have nice activities like culture days. When you're doing your PowerPoint presentations, include visuals that are inclusive. Look at the policies at that organization. Look at the walls, the posts that you put up and everything, and make sure they are quite inclusive. Look at your websites. Look at the policies you have internally. I spoke about sexual harassment, bullying, and respectful workplace policies. And then from a profession's action, as assistants, as support, we need to be more inclusive in our committees, in our conferences, in the spotlight articles and the interviews that we make. People are looking at this and asking, can I feel included when I watch this? The surveys that we are sending out need to reach everyone, far and wide. Sometimes we say places are underrepresented, but we haven't found the right ways of reaching all the way to the last voice. And then in terms of resource groups, we need to help shape. If you create a resource group, you help shape the understanding of that group, whatever group you are. Maybe it's a resource group for differently abled people or resource group for youth or whatever. Help victims, help perpetrators, help people who are not understanding exactly how that group works. And with that, I want to thank you so much for coming to the meeting today, and just to be able to say Diversity, inclusion, and belonging is real. It is here to stay. It is very important for all of us to partake and take a stand and act. Our actions actually add a lot of value to it. And with that, I thank you very much. Send any questions you might have to srichson@gmail.com. I'm looking forward to interact with you more on these issues, but I hope now you have more simple ways of actually creating a more inclusive space. Thank you for listening. Over and back to you, Sarah Richson, as usual, talking about diversity and inclusion.